All right, folks, as we enter America's golden era, that means major resets. We know the Trump team has been a whirlwind crisscrossing around the globe, and, well, it's put the global elites on notice. J.D. Vance, of course, left them quivering in Munich. Rubio's had his face-to-face meetings, of course. He had one with Russia to end that war most recently. And then there's President Trump and really the early tariff concessions that he's made. The question, though, is what's the end game? How do we really get from here to there? I want to bring in now Bianco Research President Jim Bianco, because, Jim, you know, a lot of talk out about your Mar-A-Lago Accords, sort of a Bretton Woods 3, which was outlined by Zoltan Pozsar back in 2022. I want to get your feelings on, I have his report here, and a synopsis saying we are witnessing the birth of Bretton Woods 3, a new world monetary order centered around commodities-based currencies in the East that will likely weaken the euro-dollar system and contribute to inflationary forces in the West. What does that have to do with the way President Trump is trying to position America for the next 100 years?
So he's got an America First policy where he's looking at our trading partners and our allies, and he's believing that they've had a free ride for the last, basically since the end of World War II. And to rectify that, he's got three basic plans. He's got plan one, which we all know is tariffs. Tariffs can be used as either leverage or they could be used as sources of revenue. Step two is the Sovereign Wealth Fund that he signed an executive order to create. And they're looking at creating that. And they've said monetize assets. And that is, what does that mean? That means taking assets we have like gold that's valued at $42 an ounce. We have 8,000 tons of it, and revaluing it to $2,900, which would basically put about $1 trillion into that fund. And step three is security arrangements. And we've seen this with what President Trump and J.D. Vance have said in just the last couple of days. Europe, you've had a free ride on security. The U.S. pays 70% of NATO's budget. It's time that you start paying for your own security. And they've been talking about potentially issuing $3 trillion of debt in order to do that, 5% of their GDP. But there's another idea that was been thrown out there. How about you swap your Treasury securities that you have right now for 100-year zero-coupon bonds from us? These would be non-marketable bonds. They would have a value of about 13 cents today and then would mature at $1 or $100 in 100 years. And that would reduce our debt, our deficit, and that would also bring down the dollar. Look, if you think this is a crisis, we have too much debt, we have too much borrowing, requires bold thinking. And that's exactly what this is. Yeah,
Jim, I love the way you laid it out there. We've got it here on the screen. Just to remind folks again, you've got three things: tariffs, part of its leverage, part of its revenue generation, sovereign wealth fund, monetizing these assets that you've talked about in this 100-year bond. So, I happen to love it. I think it's a great idea. I guess this century, 100-year bonds, converting current treasuries, accepting that. We've seen these Europeans, they are just in a fit over J.D. Vance's comments, and so are a lot of folks in America, right, particularly on the left or in the media. Will they feel bullied, or are they just in no position at this point to even fight back?
Yeah, I think that they might be in no position because the world has been bilateralized, that on one side you've got Russia, you've got China, North Korea, and Iran. And on the other side, you've got the United States, which has basically been pulling the load for 80 years, trying to keep the world order together. And they've been in the middle, and haven't had to pay for it. So, yeah, will they feel a little bit bullied? Sure, they might feel a little bit bullied. But the argument is this is an America First policy. They've had a free ride. Now it's got to change. And the American public voted for it. And I think that's the most important part, is that in the past, they would try to appeal to the American media, or they would try to appeal to, the American press to say, look at this terrible idea, which is something along the lines of America First. Now that's not getting any kind of play. In other words, if Trump pushes an America First policy, the public's not turning against it here, and the Europeans are slowly starting to realize that.
Yeah, and of course, let's not forget who actually rebuilt Europe after World War II. We put a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and a lot of money into the continent over time. So I love it. I love the way you laid it out. We'll see what happens. Jim, thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you.